Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses who are here. We discussed it a little bit earlier, but I'd like to put a little bit of a finer point on it. In the 117th Congress, then Chairman Jerry Nadler, as well as Hank Johnson, introduced the Judiciary Act of 2021, which would have increased the size of the Supreme Court from 9 justices to 13. That bill had 59 Democrat co-sponsors, and they were so convicted that the size of the Supreme Court should be 13 justices that they then reintroduced the same bill in the following Congress and received 65 co-sponsors. So I am looking forward to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle reintroducing that bill this Congress as well. We hear a lot about bipartisanship, and I'm sure you can get a little bit of bipartisan support for that when you do. But with that said, Mr. Chairman, civilization is a very fragile thing. And in the Western world, particularly in the United States, it's been unraveling as the left and their allies on the courts have intentionally and deliberately facilitated the mass migration of criminal illegal aliens into our communities. These are people who are murdering and raping and pillaging American citizens on American soil, a country that was once the zenith of civilization. America increasingly resembles the third world and is reverting to barbarism, as Ms. Romero's testimony so poignantly underscores. And instead of fighting for the preservation of our communities and the integrity of our nation's sovereignty, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to keep alien terrorists within our borders. And it's so many times district court judges are leading the charge. And I think that Judge Boasberg is an excellent example of that. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for being here. It's an honor to be able to speak with you and ask you questions. I look up to you a lot. Could you explain how much constitutional and legal authority does Congress have to oversee lower courts?
Well, there's virtually, if it acts with the executive branch. I mean, the part of the theory of Montesquieu's spirit of the law, which is the base of the Constitution, is that you have these 3 bodies. Any 2 outvotes the other one. So in a very real sense, the Congress and the judiciary could take on the executive, or the judiciary and the executive could take on the Congress. There's a constant revolving. President Jackson made the argument that, in fact, each of us, every elected official, has an equal obligation to enforce the Constitution. And he refused to accept the idea that the court could instruct him. I mean, they very blatantly just said, glad you think that, I don't. And then Taney, who was his attorney general, who defended that, ends up as a Supreme Court justice, in many ways leading to the Civil War by his decision in Dred Scott. So I think you have every right, if you read the Constitution itself, you create lower courts. I mean, the Supreme Court is superior in the sense that it's the one thing in the Constitution you could not eliminate except by constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. But everything below that is a creature of the legislative-executive agreement. I'm assuming here you're not going to try to override the president, but theoretically, the Congress could decide, and if it had the votes in the House and Senate, you can override a president.
Right.
So the courts are actually much more subject to the policing of the elected officials of the United States than they think they are, and that's because for about 3 generations now, law schools have taught this mythology of legal supremacy based on the judicial branch alone. It's nonsense. It's one of 3 co-equal branches, and it is the weakest of the 3, not the strongest.
In terms of enforcing that oversight, putting aside whether impeachment is the most expeditious or prudent means right now to oversee the courts, do you believe that it should be at least considered as an option to remedy blatant or flagrant judicial overreach from district court judges?
Well, I think that Chairman Issa has exactly the right first step. I mean, look, we're in the middle of such enormous change that this will strike some of you who know my career as sort of unusual. I'm actually now in a period of thinking incrementalism may be pretty good, because we've actually set an enormous shift strategically, and now we need to spend a little bit of time cautiously, so I don't want to overreach, which you, I mean, theoretically, you could abolish the district judges. I mean, you have that power if the president agrees. But that would be an enormous jump. And I think the country needs to educate itself, and frankly, the judges are going to get educated. If they see the legislative branch seriously moving, I mean, it's one thing to have the president say something, from the bully pulpit. It's another thing to suddenly see laws moving and realize, if we don't pull back a little bit, this could become uncontrollable.
Yep.
I'm hoping, that's why today I've repeatedly talked about the opportunity the Chief Justice has, because I really hope he'll realize he has the best, easiest, least disruptive solution.
And for the record, I agree that I think that Mr. Isa's bill is an excellent piece of legislation that we should all be able to get behind.
As a freshman,
Thank you.
you're going to go far.